Hey, Amy. How's it going?
I'm good, Shahar. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so glad you're here because I wanted to talk to you about DAOs. And I know, this is a topic a lot of people are really curious about and interested in. It's a very new topic. And so being a crypto native and someone that's participated in a lot of DAOs, I was hoping, we could have a conversation about it. And so maybe where we should start is, Amy, what is a DAO?
Yeah, so a DAO, I think of it as a new experiment in how we're organizing and coordinating people. It stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and I'm going to break down each one of those components because it sounds like a lot. So decentralized because where traditional companies and organizations tend to be very tight and hierarchical, DAOs tend to be more loose and more flat. So autonomous because a lot of the decision making and things like how do you spend money, that happens on the blockchain. So it can be autonomous. And then the last one I think is obvious, organization. It's tackling how we organize and coordinate human effort towards a mission.
Really interesting. So kind of like the traditional organizational structure, right? But with, we've applied these kind of Web3 tools and ethos around like transparency and decentralization to it. I think the next question is, all right, what's the advantage, right? Why, right? Why decentralized? Why autonomous, mm-hmm. right? What's the advantage of doing things in this DAO-like way?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is transparency. So in traditional organizations, you're operating within a hierarchy. Oftentimes, as an individual contributor, you may or may not have insight into not just the direction that the organization is going, but also how decisions are made. Oftentimes that's not clear. And so the transparent part allows for decreased risk of things like corruption. And it just allows more innovation because people know what's going on. I would say that another benefit as to why is that it gives people more ownership over when they want to contribute. And like your time, right? How much you want to work, how much you want to spend on yourself, the types of work that you can do because you have more control over what types of activities and mission to contribute to. So, I know that you've been in the Web3 space for a while. I'm curious if any of that, I'm sure it does, but what about that resonates for you?
Yeah, no, that definitely lands for me. And I think, I think all of that is true. And like you were saying with, being able to capture people that are coming in at kind of various levels and with various, personal bandwidth, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has millions of things going on now and everyone's attention span has, deteriorated perhaps. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that's not you, but so, DAOs I think really excel at that exact thing, right? At being able to kind of, capture, let's call it like the long tail mm-hmm. of people that want to contribute to an organization or to a mission, to a cause, right? But don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do it, in a traditional setting. Traditional corporate, structures kind of demand you to be, full-time or maybe part-time, or even if you're just kind of contracting, right? There's kind of this structure and there's this kind of box put around it, right? Whereas I think DAOs, allow you to kind of come in at any level with however much time you might have, and you can still find a way to contribute and to add value. And then maybe if you like the DAO, right, you can start to get deeper in. Is that kind of, how you think about it? As an individual, right, that's coming in to try to contribute to a DAO, what are kind of the challenges around that? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think for anyone who's trying to jump into what we're calling the DAO life, the Taoist approach, yeah. There's that initial phase where because DAOs are mission focused, you go through a DAO dating period where you you start to fall down a rabbit hole of, let's say, decentralized science, which is something that I'm super excited about. There's all these different DAOs that are working on specific aspects of how do we use blockchain technologies to solve issues in the scientific community around like funding and information access. But then there's also the component, not just of the mission, but how does that DAO function? Some people, and there's like a spectrum of how decentralized a DAO can be versus how centralized or more organized, and that differs by person. So some people really like a totally flat DAO structure. Some people like more organization. So you basically go through a process of finding that sweet spot for what makes the most sense for you. And so that gives people more agency to be able to select in and out of not just the tasks and the things you're contributing to, but also the organizations. I think there's also a lot more flexibility. So a lot of people in the Web3 space just love to learn. And I know that you've mentioned a little bit about your past of trying to shift out of one department of an organization into another, and how challenging that has been. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to what that was like and how you've seen that type of issue be solved in DAOs.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I had a corporate job and had the experience of trying to shift departments or projects or the things that that I was interested in, and there's the bureaucracy. Obviously, the organization tries to make it smooth, but right, exactly. So in DAOs, I think it's a lot more fluid. There's so many options out there, and because of kind of the light touch approach to it, it becomes really easy to do. And I really like your analogy with like dating, right? You can kind of date around, and you can, a lot of DAOs aren't going to make it past the first date, right?
Yeah.
But then I think what's cool, right, is because DAOs sort of have this structure and ethos around them. The people that are in the DAOs, right, that have kind of made it through the dating phase, right, and they're there and they're contributing, they're working on it, right. You kind of know that they're there for a reason, right, that they're really aligned with the mission. Right, because it's super easy, right? If someone ever, this happens all the time, of course. I think if someone doesn't feel aligned with the mission anymore, they just move on to the next DAO, and it's just like right click, leave server.
Yeah.
Go to the next server down, right? That you might be in, and start contributing to that DAO where you feel aligned. So what I've experienced in DAOs, is this real feeling of camaraderie and people kind of being very mission oriented, because otherwise you're just not going to be there, right? People self-select right into these things, and I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I know you and I have talked about a lot of the ethos around DAOs coming from Web3, coming from blockchain, and something that I love about DAOs is the ability to select in and out of the organization, but then also select in and out about your contribution level. So I like to think about it just like in blockchains where you have nodes that can enter and exit the network at will. You've got the same thing, which is really great for helping prevent burnout.
Yeah, I think I really like that analogy too. It may be a bit of a nerdier analogy than the dating thing, but yeah, like a blockchain network, right? These DAOs are the same type of networks. They deal with the same network effects, and they allow, right, everyone to kind of enter and exit kind of at will. I think there's this really interesting, because I want to talk about the future, and I want to ask you what you think about, where is this going, right? One thing I like to think of is, I think there's this weird intersection in DAO specifically, right, between kind of, personal freedom and personal responsibility that Web3 is like really all about, but then also kind of collectivism, right, and even socialism to a degree, right, where people are really trying to, all work together, share in the protocol, right, share in the resources, vote, really transparently in this very fair, like collectivist way, kind of. So, what is the future, right? I'll make this easy for you, right? What is the future of DAOs? What is the future of work, right? How do these things impact each other and come together? Where do you think this is going?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to pull out a couple of words that you said there that I think are really key. The first one is ownership, right? So like the promise of DAOs, the reason we're all so excited is because it's really putting agency and ownership into the contributors around the organization you're working for, the mission you're working towards. You don't have to ask a boss to approve vacation. You get to choose, right? And on the ownership side, that also means that you have to, just like everything else, do your own research. You have to figure out what work is out there, and you've got to figure out for yourself how you're gonna make a living. What I think is, what I get excited about with DAOs, there was a great talk at ETH Denver, and I believe the panel was talking about public goods. And I'm paraphrasing here, but one of the questions posed was, what if in the future we're no longer thinking about just how much money you can make, but we're thinking about causes that you care about. And so we're putting together a future world where, yes, you're making money, but you have that ability to do something good for the world, which I know I'm really excited about. I know you're really excited about. But I think the thing that we need to remember right now is that this is a very new experiment in how to coordinate people. So before we get too excited, I think there's a lot of work that we need to do. And I'm curious what you've seen in terms of just overarching issues that DAOs are trying to work through today.
Well, I think that's really well put. I like to think about it in that frame of, this is a coordination, challenge. And DAOs are attacking this coordination challenge in a new way. And I think, that future picture you painted of, imagine if everyone was just, could just kind of come to an organization and work, based on mission alignment, and they and we had like that self-selection down really well, right? And DAOs were really efficient in kind of capturing that. And you just have these organizations where everyone there is just so kind of aligned, right? And there's no real question about it, and everything's really transparent. It sounds kind of idealist, right? Yeah. And I think there's a long way to go there. But we're trying to figure it out.
Overall, when it relates to DAOs, right? Like just like we talked about, this is a new experiment in how to coordinate human efforts and work. What are the common challenges that DAOs face today?
Yeah, I think they're still trying to figure out that challenge around coordination and what's best, and everyone works differently, right? So DAOs have to be similarly kind of as flexible in different options. So I think they're still figuring out what is the optimal organizational structures that kind of still accomplishes what we've talked about in terms of keeping mission alignment, allowing people to kind of contribute the resources that they have and getting the most out of that. While getting the most out of, I guess I would say, everyone's contributions, right, at the level that they're at. So I think that's still getting figured out, iterated on. Going back to ETH Denver, there was a talk where I think someone made a really good case for kind of this working group structure in DAOs, where you kind of have these, team leaders in different kind of working groups that again have kind of self-selected into those roles, so that once again, when someone comes in with a limited amount of time and a certain skill set and alignment to the mission, and so they want to contribute, they can see exactly kind of where to go and kind of how to contribute, so that their contribution gets recognized and used and kind of funnels up to the DAO where it needs to go. And having that figured out, right, is very empowering for people that might come in, and so it has kind of a positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah. I'm 100% with you on that one. I think if you're listening to this and you're following what we're saying is the biggest opportunity in DAOs, I know that the thing I was the most skeptical about, which is coming from like a big corporate company, how do you coordinate that many people in a flat structure? Is it just chaos, or is everyone just kind of running to the beat of their own drum? And I think what you touched on there is something that we're figuring out as a Web3 community. But I think the key thing to remember is that decentralization does not equal no structure, right? I think the DAOs that are figuring this out and doing it the right way are figuring out how to cut down in that chaos. So some of the DAOs that I'm in, just as you mentioned, have divisions called guilds or pods. And if I were to draw a parallel, it's kind of similar to departments in traditional companies. But they have like a subject that they're focused on or an area of expertise, and it allows more concentration of skills of the people who are trying to contribute.
So that kind of like pod model, or like working groups. I think I've heard you call it pods before.
Yeah. A lot of the ones I'm in have used the term guild, but I've heard
guild.
That the new method of terming is pods.
Right. Okay. That's the meta. The pod meta. Yeah. And I think something we maybe didn't talk about, right, is the actual methods, and the tools that DAOs are using to kind of accomplish that, transparency and alignment, and keeping everyone trusting the decisions that the DAO is making. I think typically DAOs use things like Snapshot is a very popular tool, right, where people will use like their governance tokens or maybe NFTs, right? If the DAO has given out NFTs, and will be able to vote, without having to make transactions, right, on something like Ethereum, but be able to vote, with their wallet on certain proposals, right, that the community might bring. So you can go look at, Snapshot votes on certain proposals for certain DAOs, and you can see, right, how each address has voted with their tokens. You can see how many are for or against, and once again, right, it's all on the blockchain. So we can all believe it, right, and we can move forward. We don't have to argue about the facts anymore about who wants what, right?
Yeah. I think having that transparency and a record of decisions that are made, who specifically voted for what. Like I said, we're not going to have this solved perfectly today. And I'm sure even 10 years down the road, DAOs will face issues because people face issues when it comes to coordination. But having that transparency and being able to trust that record means that people have the ability to identify maybe things that didn't work and then innovate on how to solve that for the next season or cycle or quarter or whatever term your DAO is using to segment time.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wanted to say that I think on that note, something that if you're looking to date DAOs that you should add to that list, your checklist of your perfect DAO partner, is looking at their governance documents.
Yeah.
And getting more familiar with the different tools that are used, and also how or what you need to have in order to vote, right? Because it's different for every DAO, and some have much lower barriers to enter in terms of your voting power, and some have higher. Some of them have tiers, right, in terms of what level you are as a contributor that can impact your voting power. So that should definitely be added to your speed dating checklist.
Yeah, really great point. And I think most every DAO will have some sort of document like that, like a governance paper, a light paper, beige. I've heard one called a beige paper.
I've not heard that one.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what determines. I think it's just the color of the paper that it's on. I don't know. But I think those are some great tips, Amy, for DAO speed dating. So if you're interested, right, in getting involved in some DAOs, we're really trying to make that empower you and enable you here in the community. So we have our DAO discussion channel, and that's definitely where we'll keep this conversation going, and keep asking questions and trying to find answers, and growing with the space as we all try to figure this stuff out. So
wag me.
Wag me.
Wag me.
Wag me together.